So, type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm Edmond Chizito. On Spectrum tonight, will government's latest proposals to tackle the current economic crisis have the desired impact? Well, tonight we're going to look at this specific issue which has dominated all week this week, with the crisis failing to define all solutions, all attempts to solve it. Yesterday, Cabinet held a day-long meeting to try and get an answer. We still haven't got a budget button to get it out of there. Our guests tonight discuss this topic. Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, legal consultant at AKIJUL, also a commentator on social, economic, and political issues. You're most welcome, Mr. Opiyo.
Well, thank you very much, Edmund. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to a very fruitful discussion. And hello, listeners. And for all of you who are watching us on the internet, good evening.
We also expect to be joined by two other guests, Hon William Oketcho, former West Budama Mp and Chairman of the Budget Committee of Parliament, as well as Mr. Asuman, Basalirwa, President of the Justice Forum Party, also known as JEEMA. These two will join us in a short while. Mr. Opiyo, let's talk about the state of the economy and the proposed government changes. The government has announced that it has removed import duties on sugar and allowed importers to bring in the commodity almost sugar tax-free. But the government has refused to do the same for fuel, saying that levy on fuel is a lifeline for the economy, earning the country over 700 billion shillings. Now, members of parliament and experts on economic issues have indicated government should actually remove or lower some of these taxes on fuel and other essential commodities. They've been saying that sugar is not really the most crucial commodity. What do you make of this intervention?
Well, Edmund, first and foremost to acknowledge that the country is in hard economic times. I think this has probably been one of the hardest economic times in the last couple of years. I have never had to line up for sugar in my whole life. The stories about lining up for sugar were stories I had from my father. I have had to line up for sugar this week in the supermarkets. So I think we are in very hard economic times. The prices of many other essential commodities is rising. It's going by the roof. I think it is imperative on us to ask ourselves how we got to this point in the first place. Now, a myriad of factors have been advanced to explain the current status of affairs, many of which, are international factors. The general slump in the world economy, and many other issues, including climate, have been blamed for the dire economic condition the world finds itself in today. But I can tell you that over the last 2 months, the worst performing currency in the world has been the Uganda shilling.
Yes.
It has lost value by more than 12% over the last 2 months alone. That should point to the fact that in spite of the global economic challenges, other countries have done a lot better in maintaining their economies, in providing buffers against these shocking pressures of the world economy. How have we as a country failed to do that? I think in responding to that question, we've got to look at the fundamentals. I think the root cause of our economic failures have been the rather hard hoc and donor-driven economic policies. From the beginning of the 1990s, the country adopted economic policies that were not, first of all, originated from the local people. We had World Bank specialists. We had specialists from all countries around the world coming to develop economic policies for our country. As such, we had an economic module that was bound to be unfit or not befitting for this country. As such, we lost track of what we should have done in very early stages. We went for economic liberalization, I think, far too early. Instead of purely going for liberalization, we handed over states parastatals and key pillars of our economy, not to businessmen, but to poor brokers who could not manage business who at all had no idea on how to run these businesses. We had towns like Jinja that had many factories. These factories were given to people who just came and, picked them up and came and sold spare parts in Kampala. We had cooperatives that had big food silos. I was growing up in Gulu. There was a big store near the railway quarters where food produce, in fact, it was called the Produce Marketing Center. That place was given to private individuals who turned it into disco halls. So we gave out our key economic treasures in the hands of power brokers who did not, in the end, begin to invest in the economy, begin to invest in production, but went for quick bucks. So we got it wrong at that point. Progressively, this has come to haunt us. We do not have buffers against this economic slump of the world. We are left exposed. As a result, high cost of living. As a result, the worst performing currency around the world. The second point that I want to make is in reference to the politics. Because the economic crisis is a result of political failures. They are closely interlinked. You cannot divorce the two because they are related. I think that by and large, our economic governance or democratic governance of this country has a bearing on issues of the economy. I'll give you an example. In the whole of East Africa, it takes 25 days and 28 different procedures to start a business. In Rwanda, it takes you 3 days. You can begin a business online. In Uganda, the process is bureaucratic, it is long, it's full of all sorts of things. Now, because of these processes, you have corruption. You have got to oil the system to get a passport. You've got to oil the system to have a company registered. That inevitably has a long-term effect on the cost of doing business and on the health of the economy. The second thing is the lack of proper institutions. Institutions just don't work in this country. If you want to do clean business, you don't do it here. People who do business here is primarily because they can cut shortcuts. They can find shortcuts. So our economic foundation in that respect has been weak. There was a beautiful article in the Monitor a couple of weeks ago by Charles Nyango-Go that when when Southern Sudan was having a new nation, Ugandans were selling Seganet, while Kenyans were opening banks. That is the precise reason that Ugandan businessmen and Ugandan business, or the climate of business in this country, is completely not one on rules, because offices don't work according to rules. Things are just run, in accordance with who you know, how much you can pay. So I think we've got to go back to the basic, address first and foremost the question of democratic governance. Let systems work, plug the loopholes of corruption, make the cost of doing business in this country a bit low. Secondly, we've got to go back to the drawing board and rethink long-term our economic approaches in addressing on how we handle the economy of this country. Short of that, we will have short-term measures, because what the measures we are having now being proposed by government, I think they're ad hoc. It is knee-jerk. It is aimed at providing a solution for a short-term problem. I don't see a consistent thread, line of ideas aimed at making this country a viable country in terms of the economy. So I think those are the fundamental problems that have bedeviled our country. Thirdly, and lastly, I think I mentioned it here on this show a while ago, that because of these problems, we need a national conference to dialogue over this matter. I think that the reason why you haven't heard from Cabinet what they discussed last night is perhaps because they just had no solution. In order for us to be able to have a solution that is acceptable to everybody, we need to have a conclusive, an inclusive national process of dialogue to bring on board the best brains in this country to discuss the issues of the economy. Short of that, the movement alone cannot find a solution that can sort out this problem. One party alone cannot do it. We need to have a broad-based national consultative meeting to discuss this issue and find solution as a country.
Well, that's quite interesting. Look at the situation as it pertains right now in this country's economy. Mr. Asuman, what's your view? How do you think we got here? How can we get out? Is the government trusting the right party?
Yeah, thank you very much, Edmond, and good evening all our listeners and colleagues on the panel. First of all, I think we need to discuss how we got to this position. It is my considered opinion that over time, as a country, we have really been failing in our priorities. Uganda is predominantly an agricultural country. Agriculture should be able to constitute the greater part of our GDP. Unfortunately, as a country and even in the region, we have failed to take advantage of the fact that we have 2 rainy seasons and 2 dry seasons, and that even that climate alone should be enough to make our country a food basket. It should be enough to make our country self-reliant in terms of food production. Unfortunately, agriculture over time has been receiving lip service, lip attention in terms of budgeting, and because of that, our agriculture has gone down. So it's our failure to invest massively in the agricultural sector that we are finding ourselves in this crisis. Number 2, over time, the cost of public administration has been so high. Many districts, many presidential advisors, a very big parliament. And therefore, we are engaging in consumption rather than production. And that has been a very big problem. Thirdly, the issue of corruption, embezzlement, swindling public resources has been the order of the day. We are a country that has very good laws, anti-corruption laws. We are a country that has very many very many institutions that are designated to fight corruption. But corruption, as you will discover, is not fought through laws. It's not fought through institutions. It's fought through political will. Just the other day, we were reading in the papers, 5 billion shillings cannot be accounted for. A certain ghost company was supposed to procure 70,000 bicycles. Up to now, nobody knows the whereabouts of that one. That company.
Yes.
And we are here, people are going in the committees, and the committee is leaving Ministry of Local Government officials to go scot-free. 5 billion shillings being paid to some unknown company to procure 70,000 bicycles.
Some say they say the bicycles are on the way.
Yeah, for LC1 and LC2 to do mobilization. So that has become a problem. Now, when you are looking at the crisis, the meltdown we are facing as a country, it's important for us to look at the 3 issues. The fact that we have neglected agriculture, the huge cost of public administration, and the failure to make corruption a very dangerous exercise in this country. Now that we are there, what do we do as a country? You see, the president has been saying that the current inflation, that there is no problem. Okay. By the way, the economists will tell you that inflation per se is not bad. Actually, a country that does not experience inflation, or where inflation is stagnant, it means there is no economic growth. So inflation in some instances can be good, but it can only be good if you anticipate it. Where it is not anticipated, like
it must match with economic growth.
Exactly, because in most economies, 2-3% inflation is okay. Here we are talking about 18 point something inflation, and basically you look at 2 causes. Either it's they call it demand pull inflation, where goods and services are limited and the demand is high, or cost push, where cost of production is very high. Now in our case, first of all, the inflation was not anticipated. Secondly, it is multifaceted. There is a limit. Goods and services are in short supply, but also the cost of production has gone high because of various factors. Now, what do we do in the circumstances? I was looking at the 2011 budget. There are some long-term measures, if I could say. For instance, on the side of agriculture, 133 billion committed to NADS, okay? And of course, notwithstanding the problems of NADS. 30 billion shillings are going to the agricultural sector. They are looking at 2 billion shillings going to establishment of warehouses. No, the 30 billion shillings has been going to the agricultural credit facility at a rate of 10% for the next 8 years. Okay? Now, those are interventions. 50% cut on government advertising and all that. Then, of course, the 30% cut on allowances, workshops, and the rest. Some long-term measures in terms of budgeting. Now, and Honorable Chiwanuka, the minister, was reading this. We are not sure whether the minister and government will be able to walk the talk, as it were. Now, we are finding ourselves in a very difficult situation as a country. What do we do? Now, what do we do? It is my considered view, opinion, that at the moment, this is the time for us to, because you see, our budget has been full of contradictions. You are talking about reducing, investing heavily in agriculture. You are cutting expenses, some expenses in public administration, but you are not reducing areas where money is going. You are bringing a proposal to cabinet to increase the number of ministers. Okay? And as a president, you are not showing commitment to fight corruption. So the budget becomes...
When he was in Rwanda, the president complained. He said that too many lives in Uganda. He's very committed to fighting corruption.
Yes, no, but you see, I will tell you, you are talking about Rwanda. When you look at Rwanda, what is here in terms of legal framework, in terms of institutional framework, it's there in Rwanda. But the difference, as I've said, is the political will. When you are president and your former vice president is on trial, and you make a statement that you find no weight in the allegations, and you see here in this country, in most of these developing countries, president's statements almost amount to law. So the president arrogated unto himself the powers of being a chief prosecutor. And I want to assure you, we will be back here. The Bukenya case is likely to be an instant. If you're a DPP, if you're a magistrate, you're a prosecutor, and the head of the state says that person you're prosecuting is innocent, what do you do?
Who are you?
What do you do? Who are you? So that one becomes a fundamental problem. I am proposing that as we talk now, in this current crisis, it's important that government begins scaling down on public expenditure extensively. You remember I was here with Captain Mike Mukula one time he hosted us, and I was saying that this is the time, for example, for us to begin seeing presidential convoy is being reduced, ministerial convoy is being reduced, so that you save on the amount of fuel. It was at this table where I proposed that, for example, we should be seeing the government importing vehicles with lower consumption capacities.
They used to have Nissan Laurel.
Exactly, in the early 1980s. Okay, where are they? Can we? Because Edmond, if you calculated, I have not done any calculations, but if you calculated the amount of fuel, the cost of fuel consumed by most of these vehicles, it's astronomical. So we would be seeing some of these government officials, government ministers, deliberately resorting to vehicles that consume less fuel, as it is done elsewhere. You know what happened in Kenya? You know what happened in Rwanda? That one is not being done. So this is the time for us as a country to reduce on the cost of public administration. Number two, I also think that this is the time for government to come up with very attractive incentives for investors, especially foreign investors. Okay? Especially foreign investors. I am saying it deliberately, with the hope that they will be able to come here, boost the production, probably bring some dollars, but also limit on capital flight. Okay? And deliberately. So, incentives to investors, in my view, would also work. Unfortunately, this should have been the time for us to rely on our foreign reserves. Unfortunately, you already tampered with them, okay? By buying fighter jets for ostensibly for security,
protect
our borders and the rest. You know, I have told you here before that security is more internal than external. when there is harmony in a country will be secure. When there is disharmony in a country, however much you invest in fighter jets, you'll have problems. Because all these guys had them, Ben Ali had them, Hosni Mubarak had them, but because of internal disharmony, you have problems. So we would be looking at our foreign reserves. How much do we own, do we have in foreign reserves, in gold, to recoup some of that money to stimulate production. I also think that this is the time. Nicholas has talked about dialogue. I think this is the time for us to have dialogue. I will tell you that one of the sectors that could be saving us now would be tourism. In Rwanda, which you have mentioned, tourism now is the highest foreign exchange earner. And what are they looking at? Basically, tracking mountain gorillas.
A large part of it is in Uganda.
Which for us, we have a diversity of tourist attraction scenes, okay? But at this point in time, at least the tourism sector will be saving us. But what is the problem? The president says walk to work, but of course there are many other problems. This is the time.
Even marketing budget is really time.
But also the confusion. You know what has been happening in UA, okay? Yes, there's a lot of confusion. But I also think this is the time for government to initiate dialogue with all stakeholders, because I am sure those who would be tourists would be much more comfortable if they had or witnessed harmony and dialogue among the protagonists in this country. And once you do that, of course, you are going to boost tourism. Finally, like it or not, we need to reduce taxes. We need to reduce taxes. Whether you call it controversial or not, I think the cost of doing business in this country is high simply because our taxes are very high.
This is Spectrum on Radio, and tonight, with government's latest proposal to tackle the current economic crisis, our guest tonight, Hon William Oketcho, former West Budama MP and Chairman of the Budget Committee of Parliament, joined us as he spoke. You're most welcome, Hon Oketcho.
Thank you very much.
We're going for a break. We'll be back, then you'll be able to speak to us.
3 times a year, every year for the past 6 years, I have been stressed going to pay school fees. I've woken up at the crack of dawn, taken 2 taxis and a board. Finally arrived, filled up the forms. I have lined up between a guy with kavubuka and a guy with a nasty cough. And I've waited and waited, but no more now. I have moved on with MTN mobile money. So now I pay school fees directly from my mobile while I spend time with my children.
When you move on with MTN mobile money, your children can move on to greater things. And now everyone can pay school fees with MTN mobile money. So be one of the 100 people to win 100,000 shillings towards your next school shopping when you pay school fees with MTN mobile money.
MTN, everywhere you go. Let's show you how to multiply your savings, starting with the cash beneath the mattress to the savings in the bank that aren't making money. Let's turn your savings into somethings with Super Save Reloaded. Super Save Reloaded brings you savings and investment accounts which offer you a sure and predictable way to multiply your savings. For more information about Super Save Reloaded, ask at your nearest Stanbic Bank branch. Stanbic Bank, moving forward.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back. Welcome back. On Spectrum tonight, will government's latest proposals tackle the current economic crisis have the desired impact? Our guest tonight, Hon William Oketcho, former West Budama MP and Chairman of the Budget Committee of Parliament. You're most welcome. Welcome to Radio. Actually, Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, legal consultant at AKIJUL, also commentator on social, economic and political issues. And Mr. Asuman, President of the Justice Forum Party, also known
I think this is befitting to call him Honorable Asuman Basalirwa because he's the president of the political party. The government in waiting.
but he has never sworn in.
He's president on that side. Let's hear from you, Honorable Oketcho. What's your diagnosis of this problem? How we get there and how we get out?
Really, first of all, I wish to thank those at home here. And also for you to have invited me at this moment during a very, very difficult time which Uganda is going through. because of the escalations of various things, prices, laws not being implemented well, and all this kind of. I find myself in a very interesting situation in that what I'm having come from Parliament, where the action was, I'm not looking at it from the outside, and I'm seeing that there are certain things that really that I feel we could have actually focused on more at that time, so that we could prevent this kind of situation from happening, and I think now getting worse. But Edmund, I would want to say this, that of course we're talking at the time, somewhere midway the crisis. It all started somewhere. We started with food prices rising. Food prices rose, and there was an explanation from government that there's been a
real export of crops. There was a drought as well.
Drought. People have been exporting the foodstuffs to our neighbors. There are some new markets that actually suddenly came up, and then attracted our farmers and our businessmen to export to those places, purposes of getting money, which money I think the